Hi, welcome back to the Counterfeit Emotions podcast. I'm Curtis Morley, and I'm an emotionologist. And today we have a very special guest, David York from York Hell. And the reason I'm excited for this conversation is because the first time I heard about David was when I listened to the Sparks of Gratitude podcast with Randy Sparks. And Randy and David work together. And David has written several books, including some we'll talk about today. But what really caught my attention, what really drove me to reach out and have David on the podcast was the idea of stewardship versus ownership. And stewardship being the authentic emotion and ownership being the counterfeit. And so we're going to dive into that and actually several other dyads that are connected to that pair. So, David, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this. So thanks for letting me come and spend some time chatting today.
Yeah. And let's just dive in. You recently went on a vacation
Yeah.
to, it sounds like multiple countries around the world. And we were talking beforehand about how that related to counterfeit emotions.
Yeah, it was great. We had every few years we try to get the whole family together and go someplace really neat. So we went to Greece and went to Athens and some of the Grecian islands, and then went along Montenegro, Croatia, Slovenia, and then ended in Venice, which is just an incredible city and so much history there. But while we were there, one of the things that we saw, and if anybody who's familiar with Venice, you know, Venetian glass and the gondolas and all that. But one is the masks. They're known for the Venetian masks that they would wear. In fact, Mardi Gras in New Orleans kind of carries itself from that, where people would put on masks, and one of the notions there was if you put on a mask, then you could be someone else. And if you weren't recognized, if you weren't seen by someone else, that you could live a completely separate life and you wouldn't be accountable even to what you did. And the double lives that people would live and the things that they would do or think that they could get away with when they put on this mask and this other persona.
When they just wore that mask.
Yeah.
They could get away with anything.
Exactly. And that literally even God would not recognize them if they had a mask on. And so it just sounds so foolish to us. And yet how many times in the world today do we live with these masks as well, right? These second identities, whether it's online or in how we act or what we do. We think we can divide ourselves into these different parts or different components, and it's really no sillier than what they used to do back hundreds of years ago.
and oftentimes we put on masks without even knowing it.
Yeah.
The mask we put on is this counterfeit emotion.
Yeah.
This idea that we think we're living a virtuous life. We think we're stepping into virtue and integrity, but we put on this mask that counterfeits or mimics that initial emotion. It puts on the clothing and it says, I am that emotion. Yeah. But in truth, we're actually just living a counterfeit.
Yeah. 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 And it's interesting because, again, we started in Athens, and you think so much of the Greeks and the philosophy, democracy, all of these, so much of Western civilization is just based on the Greeks. In Delphi, the oracle at Delphi, where people would go and get their futures told to them. And they had the priestesses there inside the temple where only the priestesses go. They did excavations, and inside there they had a phrase painted across the roof at the interior of this temple, and it said, "Know yourself." That really, and I can't remember if it was Socrates or Aristotle who said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
how these masks, sometimes we think that we put them on for other people, but we're putting them on for ourselves as much as anything else. And how it's so hard to even understand ourselves, much less other people.
Yeah.
We spend our whole lives trying to understand everybody else, and we don't actually understand ourselves.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Oh yeah.
And this idea that everybody's watching me, but we're so consumed with our own selves, we can't even see beyond the mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we can't hope to understand anybody else, so we can't even understand ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true. So you work at York Hal. You founded York Hal about 12 years ago, which is an estate planning company. But a lot of your writings go well beyond that, like very transcendent. And one of those topics is this idea of stewardship versus ownership,
Yeah.
which I think is a really important dyad
Yeah.
in the counterfeit emotions list.
Yeah.
And talk to me about how you came to realize that paradox of stewardship versus ownership.
Yeah. So it was an experience that I had with a client of mine, Gail Miller, owner of the Utah Jazz. Honestly, one of the most amazing people I've met in life. One of my role models. Yeah, she's every bit what she appears to be. One of my role models in life, and had the privilege of helping on one of the things that we did together was to work on creating a trust that would hold the Utah Jazz, with the goal of keeping it in the community. She really saw it as so integral to the state and to the people of the state. And she wanted to make sure that it resided here. And so we were working on a trust. While we were going through it and she was reading it, I just happened to ask her, I said, so how will it feel to no longer own the Jazz? Because we were transferring it into this trust. And she looked up at me and she said, well, I don't own the Jazz. And went back to reading. And, Gail's one of the sharpest people I've met. And, they had 70 different operating businesses at that time. She not only knew,
70.
Yeah, she not only knew all the details of those, but she knew what every single child, grandchild, great grandchild was up to. Just amazing. But, I'm still the lawyer. And so, I still had to pause and I had to say, well, no, actually, you do own the Jazz. Like
all the papers have your signature at the bottom.
Just making sure, And I'll never forget. She stopped what she was doing and she looked up at me and she said, no. She said, I'm a steward of the Jazz. And at that moment, I saw someone who had transcended ownership. And there was something more here than I had ever seen. I mean, I grew up in the United States of America in the midst of capitalism, and ownership is the pinnacle, right? The top title is owner.
What we think is I'm going to be the owner, the founder, the CEO. I'm going to be the top. Yeah.
Exactly. And so to see this, it sent me on literally just a 6-year homework assignment.
That one moment where she looked
that
at
one
you.
moment, because I did not understand what she was saying. And it was so foundational for her. And so I started to research and to study and to seek to understand this notion of stewardship, and even what it means. And so I was finally able to come up with a definition. A steward is someone who's fully invested in something bigger than themselves. So they have these two twin elements of deep engagement, but transcendent purpose. So they're all in, all of their time, their talent, their treasure. They're fully invested, but in something that's beyond themselves. And one of the best ways to understand stewardship is to understand the other side.
It's the ownership.
Well, and it's not even ownership. The opposite of stewardship is actually consumerism. A consumer is someone who has no investment. It's about receiving or consuming or using, and there's nothing bigger than themselves at all. An owner, and again, it's not to knock on owners.
Sure.
An owners are people who are all in. Their time, their talent, their treasure, they're fully engaged. But ultimately, it's not about something transcendent. And you see that the owner who climbs the hill or sells their business and has no meaning or purpose. 70% of business owners regret selling their business after they've sold it within 18 months. And it's because the business was their transcendence. It was what they were working for.
It became their identity.
Exactly.
Exactly who they were.
Yeah.
And I love that you pair the stewardship and consumerism, because every one of the counterfeit emotions has a pendulum.
Mm-hmm.
And on one side is the counterfeit, on the other side is the opposite.
Yeah.
And when there's no more swings, when there's no more mood swings, right, what you find in the center, that's where you find the authentic.
Yeah.
And so on the one side is ownership, or the counterfeit. You let that drop and you go over to consumerism, the opposite. But when the ball stops swinging, that's where you find stewardship.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is once you understand stewardship, you start to see examples of it. For example, here in the United States, I think George Washington is a fantastic example of a steward.
Mm-hmm.
He was fully invested. From the time he was named the general of the Continental Army, he was gone from Mount Vernon, which he loved more than anything else, for 8 years. Didn't go back for 8 years. Fully invested, fully engaged. And when they finally won, defeated Cornwallis at the Battle of Yorktown, and commanded the army, he went back to the Continental Congress and he resigned his post.
Said, I'm done.
He was all in, but it wasn't about himself. And really, it's one of the most remarkable moments in human history, because rarely, if ever, did someone have power and willingly turn it over. And he did it not just once, but he did it twice, being named president of the United States, and then stepping down after 2 terms. Really set the precedent of a steward and not an owner. And so no one could argue that he wasn't all in, but it also wasn't about himself. And so you start to see other examples of that. And you see that examples, it's not just about the wealthy. Anyone can be a steward. You see teachers who are stewards. You see local politicians who are stewards. You see business leaders. You see even someone working a traditional 8-to-5 job who does it with zeal and with passion, because they're doing something greater than themselves, and they're all in about it. And ultimately, the stewards are the happiest people that you'll find. But it's just a different, unique mindset, and it's a small minority of people.
Yeah. And David Hawkins, in several of his books, Letting Go, The Power versus Force, The Eye of the I, he talks about he created the emotional spectrum of the frequency spectrum of emotions. And he talks about that most of humanity is below a 190 in their emotional frequencies, which is a very low frequency. And then you go higher and higher as you get more transcendent, more self-aware, and more authentic. And when we do that, then all of a sudden what we thought was our identity, what we thought we were attached to, what we thought was us,
Mm-hmm.
it just fades away.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we realize that bigger vision.
Yeah.
We realize there's more to this life than just the constant pursuit of more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and didn't George Washington, didn't he take from one of his not mentors, but one of his heroes back in history, which is named after the city Philadelphia, right?
No, Cincinnati.
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 Oh, you're right. Yes,
Yeah.
Cincinnatus.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Philia is brotherly love. Cincinnatus.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Cincinnatus was a Roman statesman, and back then, Rome was this kind of hodgepodge of different areas and regions, and they were in the midst of a war, and so the Roman Senate went to Cincinnatus and said, "Would you help lead us?" And they basically turned all power over to Cincinnatus. And he actually led them in a very, very decisive victory over their enemies. And he essentially was the ruler dictator of Rome, and he stepped down. The crisis had come.
To go back to farming, right?
He'd go back to farming. Yeah.
He went from the ruler of the civilized world,
Yeah,
to step down to go back to farming.
Yeah. Yeah. And you recognize, and he did that not once but twice. So they came back to him actually a second time. I think the second time he was in his 80s, and actually asked him to come lead a second time, and he did it a second time and stepped down again, because he saw a need. He saw something that was bigger than himself, the need of his country, and he stepped up to it. And when the time was over, he stepped back down and returned that power. And it's just antithetical. You see that, and it's not a political party. It's a human condition. You see that among our political leaders who want to hold on to and retain power. One of the highest death rates of any profession in the United States is Supreme Court justice. 40% of them die in office while serving, because they want to serve and be in that role as long as they live. It's
wow.
Yeah. And so it's human nature is to seek to obtain and hold on to power, and stewardship holds everything really lightly. In fact, what's interesting is, a few years after we set up that trust, those here in Utah know, Gail actually sold the team to Ryan Smith, another steward who came in, and that was just it, because she was not an owner of the Jazz. She was a steward of the Jazz. She held it very loosely, and she held it with open hands. And when it was the right time and the right reason, she transferred it to another steward so that she could go and do other things to advance her position as steward. And so, again, antithetical to most of us, this concept that we would sell something like that. But when you're a steward, you don't own it to begin with. So not owning it anymore doesn't change who you are.
And I think that's one of the keys. I think that's one of the keys to be able to become a steward, is the realization that we don't own anything.
Yeah.
That there's nothing that is truly ours. And I had the opportunity to have the greatest blessings of my life, also called trials, where I did lose everything.
Yeah.
I lost money, I lost titles, I lost family, I lost it all. And my own personal blessing of having a Job moment. And when I got to where there was nothing left, I realized that God had given me 3 things that were sovereignly mine. Just 3. That's it. The first is my relationship with Him in Christ. The second is my ability to choose.
Hmm.
And the third is my soul.
Hmm.
And when I was at that point where I had nothing left, I still had those.
Hmm.
But the beauty of understanding that was that it wasn't, I didn't think, oh, I've lost so much because, my house, my cars, my blah, blah, blah. Instead, it was the realization that because I own nothing, everything is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Every breath is a gift. This conversation is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we can do good in the world is a gift. And where before I would attach myself to titles or how many magazine articles was I written in or how many Entrepreneur of the Year awards did I get or whatever it was, instead of attaching to all of that, realizing those aren't mine.
Mm-hmm.
I just get to borrow those things for a minute.
Yeah.
I get to borrow it all. And then I get to be a steward. And that's a choice. And I think that's key to understanding the difference between stewardship and ownership is we don't own anything.
Yeah.
It's not ours. We just get to borrow it for a time.
Yeah.
And be stewards of that.
Yeah.
And I love the thought that everything in life is a gift.
Yeah.
That we only have those three things that are sovereignly ours.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. And again, it's paradox. It's paradoxical in the sense that when you don't own anything, you're not owned by anything. And I think that was one of the things that I saw, and I've seen working with so many, very wealthy, ultra wealthy clients, is that many times the things that we think we own us back. And we think that we have a possession.
So key. This is so key.
We even if we realize that we may only have it for a period of time, we think it's ours, and yet you see that it owns people back. And I see that as the more that you own, people who have multiple homes, lots of cars, multiple different businesses, all of those things take from you. Mm-hmm. They take your time, they take your worry, they take your concern, they take your resources, they take your effort, they take your energy. So we tend to get into this, again, this notion of, well, the solve to consumerism is less consumerism. So it's more of a minimalist approach. Oh, if having too much is bad, then it's better to have less.
Is live in the shack in the woods.
Exactly. So the alternative to having the 5 mansions is to live in a shack. But
again, that pendulum going back and forth, like,
exactly,
I'm going to own all of this stuff versus, I'm going to own nothing, and I'm going to be like John Locke, who lived literally in a shack in the middle of nowhere.
And I see this with a lot of my clients. They see the problem of inherited wealth and too much inherited wealth. So the answer is to leave your children less. But the opposite of consumerism isn't minimalism. That's just less consumerism. The opposite of consumerism is stewardship. And I think what happens is we try to titrate how much stuff we should have, how much we should be owned by other things.
Titrate's it's $5 word. So for those who don't understand titrate,
well, it just means how much of something to have, right? Just like medication. You adjust more medication or less medication, or more of something or less of something. But you're still in the same paradigm of consumerism. What's different is the mindset. And a steward is a steward regardless of how much or how little they have. I heard Gail speaking once at an event, and she said that she's the same person she was when she was poor as a child as she is today. Because she knows who she is.
Well, let's
Um,
dig into that. So it's not less consumerism, it's stewardship because it doesn't matter the amount. And I think that's the paradox, is that it doesn't matter what you've been gifted by
yeah,
God, what you are now borrowing from God. Doesn't matter the amount, whether it's billions or $100,
yeah.
is what you do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes we have this mindset of, well, those who have a lot of resources, they're the ones responsible. They're the ones who need to give or
Mm,
pay more taxes or have more responsibility. I don't have anything, so I don't have responsibility. So sometimes we use minimalism
to
to,
vilify others.
yeah, to vilify others or to remove responsibility for ourselves. um, by the same token, sometimes we go and try to acquire a lot of stuff so we can make a difference or so that we can feed ourselves. And I'm not talking for or against having less or having more, but the I think the mistake we make is we moralize it.
Mm.
We
Ooh, dig
moralize.
deeper on that.
Well, we think it's right or wrong to have too much or too little. You know, those who have a lot say, why couldn't these people work harder or save more or engage more? They need to go out and build more. Part of that is just us trying to feel good about what we have.
Mm,
Or if we don't have things, it's because others have kept it from us, or um, we don't have the ability. Um, and we moralize that we're good because we're not, you know, Jeff Bezos.
mm,
We're not those who have too much, or those who have too much try to have a lot, try to moralize that too. And I just don't think, like I said, it has anything to do. I've found stewards across the economic spectrum. It really, it's a lag indicator. It's not a lead indicator of who we are. It's a lag, and it really has more to do with how we engage in the world than it
yeah,
has to do with who we are as a person. And I think sometimes,
yeah.
again, we want to say having a lot or not having a lot is right or wrong, when really it those two don't correlate at all.
I love that. That's such a transcendent thought.
Yeah.
That the amount doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's ultra wealthy or almost destitute. We can still be stewards of whatever we have. And I have another friend named David. We went on a bike ride all the way up from Highland Alpine up to Deer Creek
Okay.
and out midway and back. And as we were riding, um, he was very well to do, started a company, it's grown tremendously. And he was saying, Curtis, I feel so bad because I have so much.
Mm,
And he did exactly what you're talking about. He moralized the fact that he had all this money.
mm,
And we're cycling along, going up the trails, and he said, you know, I look at all these other people that don't have what I have, and I just feel so bad, and I don't feel like I deserve it. I don't feel like that I'm worthy to have this, and then because I have it, you know, I just have this shame that
mm.
goes along with it. And it was a 75-mile ride, so we had lots of time to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating because by the end of the ride, we got to this place. We got to the place of stewardship,
Mm,
of this is fantastic. And that's the beauty, is it's fantastic whether you have a lot, it's fantastic whether you have a little.
mm-hmm,
The amount doesn't matter.
mm-hmm.
Everything we have is a gift.
Yeah.
And when we see it as that gift, it's so easy to say, I'm going to take care of this.
Mm-hmm,
And I'm going to, while I get to borrow this, I'm going to take care of this to the
mm-hmm,
best of my ability.
mm-hmm,
And like you said, you see the guys mopping the floors at Walmart. You know,
mm-hmm,
one has his head down, grumbling, and
mm-hmm,
oh, this is the worst thing ever. And another is loving life and
mm-hmm.
singing while he mops and
Yeah.
doing the best job he can, or the greeter at the
Yeah.
door.
Yeah.
with that great big smile and being a steward of wherever he's at.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fundamentally different. And I do think, resources are deep water. I had a client who he grew up very poor, and his dad struggled financially his whole life, and he really looked down on wealthy people,
Mm,
and he just believed that you became wealthy by lying, cheating, and stealing.
mm,
That there was no honest rich person.
yeah,
And his son,
yeah.
kind of raised in that and heard that, and his son was able to go to college, started a very, very successful business that grew and grew, and he became wealthy. And he really struggled with that because
The son
the son
struggled
did.
with what?
Oh yeah, the son struggled a lot because he had been taught that wealthy people are bad and they got their money in dishonest ways, and he knew that what he had provided was a great service and product, and taking care of his employees, and did all that, but he felt really conflicted about what he had accomplished, and it's because of that belief in there. And when he suddenly realized that, no, what I have is not a reflection on who I am, good or bad.
Mm,
And we all do that. Um, it's simply a reflection of the work that I put in, the effort I did, the ideas that we had, the implementation, and quite frankly, some luck and timing and all of those kind of things. Um, but yeah, I think it's something that we can all struggle with, and something that we all see, and then we use it as a tool for judgment or justification.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think this transitions us into the concept of abundance versus accumulation.
Hmm.
And living an abundant mindset of being able to say, I am going to strive, I am going to work for excellence, I am going to try to get large to give large instead of get large to be large.
Hmm.
And um and the idea of, yes, like my friend on our bike ride, he's like, I'm thinking about downsizing the company. Like, he was literally having these thoughts of, it's doing too well, kind of like
Hmm.
the sun that you were talking about. It's doing too well, I can't do this because then I'm a bad person, and
Hmm.
all of that where we attach. But the idea of living an abundant life,
Hmm.
living a life where we can give large, where
Hmm.
we can do good, where we can be that steward.
Hmm.
Um, how do people break out of the mindset of money being bad? You hear the money is the root of all evil, right? But the scripture actually says the love of money
Yeah.
is the root of all evil. And I
Yeah.
think that goes back to the ownership.
Yeah.
It's not the money itself. Money is just a magnifier.
Yeah.
It's the idea of, I love this, I attach to it, I cling, I hold tight to
Yeah.
all my possessions, and don't scratch my car and don't scuff my shoes, and because that's me.
Yeah.
So how do we break free from that?
Yeah. I mean, we have to believe truths that are actually true that we don't actually believe. I remember my wife and I first got married. We had $8 in our bank account. Didn't get
Literally
paid for
$8.
literally $8. We had nothing. And I
That's
remember
fantastic.
I remember thinking, if we could eventually save up $5,000 in our bank account, we wouldn't have a care worry in the world. Like, we would be set.
5,000.
People who have $5,000 in their bank account have got to feel so secure. And we worked hard. It took a long time. We got 5,000 in the bank.
How long? How long did it take?
Years. I mean, it took years. We were poor for a long time, and but it didn't make me secure. It didn't make me feel secure. I had a client. I had one client. He was worth at the time, and this was years ago, $70 million.
Okay.
And he had 6 kids. And he explained to me, he goes, 70 million is not very much money when you have 6 kids. And I was like, yeah, that's not a lot of money, and then he would tell me about how much other people he knew had and how much more they had. And he actually he became the primary guarantor on a real estate project right 2006, 2007 that went the
Mm.
other way and lost almost everything he had.
Oh, wow.
I had another client who sold a business for $250 million, but it wasn't $1 billion. And so he took
Mm.
all that money and invested it in a new deal that was an all or nothing, either multi-billion or was going to be worthless, because 250 wasn't enough, because he knew people who had more than that. And it seems so silly, but it's a mirage. If we try to seek having enough
Yeah.
that we'll feel safe or secure or anything like that, it's unattainable. And we may know that intellectually, we don't believe that emotionally. And to me, I love the example of swamps or streams.
Tell us about that.
Well, accumulation is a swamp. All a swamp ever does, if you think about it, is accumulate and keep water. And when water sits, it becomes stagnant and
Oftentimes
diseased
putrid.
and putrid and
Yeah.
everything else. And all a swamp ever does is take. A stream receives and gives. It receives from upstream and it gives downstream. And streams are vibrant and alive, and they're full of plants and fish and everything else. But at the point that stream starts to worry about what it's getting, is it going to get enough from what's coming upstream, and it starts to limit what it sends downstream, it becomes a swamp. And again, I think we talked before. We were talking about Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and
Yeah.
that he thought self-actualization, becoming the best version of yourself, was the top of the pyramid. And then he came out and ultimately realized towards the end of his life that it wasn't self-actualization, it was self-transcendence. It wasn't freedom for yourself, it was freedom from yourself. And it's freedom from what you own. And it's freedom from what other people think and those expectations.
Yeah.
Those are actually the happiest people. The only thing that they own is their purpose. And when that's the only thing you own, it's the only thing that can't be taken from you. And I think that's part of what I see too, is as you accumulate more, you realize you can lose it. When you don't have anything, the one benefit of having nothing is that it can't be taken from you. Right? Exactly. There's nothing to lose. And that's why sometimes you need that rock bottom, because you literally you're not trying to save anything. There's nothing. It's all gone.
There really, speaking from personal experience, there really is a freedom in not having anything.
Yeah.
Because then you can't lose anything.
Yeah.
And understanding the difference between attaching to all of that, whether it's $5,000 as a young married couple or $250 million.
Yeah.
That attachment of saying, I have to cling, versus realizing, here's a gift.
Yeah.
Here's a gift I'm going to give.
Yeah.
That was given to me, just like the stream.
Yeah.
The stream receives the gift, and then the stream also delivers the gift.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And so but I think again, those so many of those things are easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
And it is a process. But one of the things I've been fortunate enough to see are very, very high net worth people, who some are still in that accumulation mode, and for them there's never enough. And there are those who are in that abundance mode where they're not owned by what they possess, and so they're free to give it away, they're free to keep it, they're free to do anything in between, because they're not owned by it,
because it's not theirs.
Exactly.
And they've never considered it theirs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love, if I can, I love that you've written a
Yeah.
children's book, Dudley's Castle, that kind of talks about these principles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What I realized, um, over the years, looking especially because a lot of estate planning at its essence is wealth transfer. And I think, unfortunately, in the United States, traditional wealth transfer just means how much in financial resources do you leave your child at death? That's what we think of when we think of wealth transfer.
Yeah.
Um, and but what I've come to realize is that there's actually four lessons of wealth. The four lessons that need to be taught. You have the trials of wealth. That's the
Mm,
pain, the suffering, the difficulty, the work, the effort, um, to build and accumulate wealth. And it comes from suffering, and it comes from work and effort and risk and all of those things.
yeah.
You have the tools of wealth. That is learning things like investing and saving and living below your means and capital markets and how to use debt and
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
a business. You have the transcendence of wealth. It's the why of wealth and the bigger nature of wealth beyond yourself. It's about others. It's about contribution and giving and generosity. And then you have the trappings of wealth, and
Mm,
that's when you learn spending money and enjoying it. And that's going out to eat or having a house or a car or a second car or a second house or trips or vacations. And you learn, I spend money, I enjoy it. The problem is for wealth creators, many of the clients I work with, they start with the trials of wealth.
mm-hmm.
They learn the tools of wealth. They come to appreciate the transcendence of wealth, and they enjoy the trappings of wealth. But for their children, when you're raised in affluence, the first lesson you learn is the trappings of wealth.
So it kind of works backwards,
Exactly.
starting with trappings and then.
Exactly. And you're raised in an environment where you see the spending of money and enjoyment. And sometimes we try to pretend like we don't enjoy it, or there aren't trappings to wealth, or there aren't benefits, and there are. And
Yeah.
we're being dishonest if we're not. Um, but the problem is not teaching the trappings of wealth. It's that we don't teach the others. And if we're not
Mm,
careful, the only lesson that children learn are the trappings of wealth. Um, and um, and when we fail to learn the trials, the pain and the suffering, I've been doing estate planning for 28 years. The one thing I've learned is that we value things based on what they cost us.
mm,
And when something comes without cost, it comes without value. And
yeah.
inherited wealth, by and large, is costless wealth. And so it's typically consumed. The average American inheritance is consumed in 18 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Regardless of the amount.
No, well, that's on average.
Oh, okay.
On average. But the average 5-year consumption rate of wealth among the wealthiest. So you say, okay, well, the average American inheritance is $186,000. That's what the average person inherits, and they spend it in 18 months.
Okay.
But obviously, there's people who inherit lots more than that, and you think, okay, well, they have great attorneys and accountants and investment advisors, and they've been raised to learn how to manage wealth.
Yeah.
The average consumption among the wealthiest inheritors is 40% in the first 5 years. So 40% is gone in the first 5 years. The
Mm.
average half-life is 8 years,
Oh, wow.
which means within one generation, on average, about 88%
It's
of
gone.
what's inherited is gone.
It's just gone.
Yeah, and it's a consumer mindset. But when you think about it, it's a consumer model. Inherited wealth says, I'm going to give you wealth that you didn't earn, it didn't cost you anything, and I'm going to give you no meaning or purpose behind it.
So the other elements.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to take everything away from it other than simply costless, undirected wealth. and then for some reason we're shocked that it's consumed, you know.
That it's gone in
Yeah, and
4 to
so
8 years.
I say all that to say to say this, the story of the book is the story of those 4 lessons.
Is
You know, Dudley is raised in the trappings of wealth. He's raised in this beautiful castle and idyllic kind of childhood, and
yeah.
but when he reaches young adulthood, his dad says, you need to know something. I don't own this castle. I'm just the steward of it.
Mm,
So even if I wanted to give this to you, I couldn't. So if you want your own castle, you have to go out and build it yourself. And so he goes out and through, you know, blood, sweat, tears, work, trial, efforts, builds his own castle, and he learns the trials, he learns the tools, but ultimately it's an empty castle. So he goes back to his dad, says, I built my castle, but it's empty. And he said, yeah, because the treasure of the castle is not the castle, it's the people and the purpose.
mm,
And until you understand the transcendence, the why did you build this, it's going to just be an empty castle. So it's just the story of going through those 4 lessons. And it's hard. And I think it's hard as parents. We naturally want to help our children avoid pain and struggle and trial.
yeah, it's very natural.
Yeah.
Very
But when we
natural.
do, we end up stripping the value from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to do, is create something that parents or grandparents and children, grandchildren could have a conversation about, you know, work and effort and sacrifice and the why of wealth and the who of wealth, and not just the what of wealth. And I think we're shortchanging our kids when we focus on
Yeah.
consumption.
Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
love like the story of Stephen Covey.
Mm.
I know most of the kids, Sean and David and Stephen MR, and they're like, "Yep, he gave all of his money away, and
Yeah.
and he told us to make our own."
Yeah.
And most have.
Yeah.
They've done phenomenally because they understood the transcendence. They understood what
Yeah.
it took, and it's fantastic to see.
Yeah. An earned dollar is always worth more than a given dollar. It's
Oh, yeah.
not, you know, and I think that's one of the things that my clients fail to understand, is that by and large, they've acquired their wealth through work and effort and sacrifice. And so they have a value to their wealth that I can't pass. I can pass the financial resources. I can't pass
The value.
the value and the costs and the pain.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the things that I think people struggle with, because they think part of why I earned my wealth was to make life better for the next generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that a lot of my clients have to work on and think about.
That's awesome. And I love that not only have you written your other books, but it sounds like this is a book we all need to read to our kids.
Yeah, that was my hope, is it was something that would, and then to share our stories with our kids. You know, I think we miss those
Share the struggle.
Yeah, we miss those fireside conversations where we would tell the story of who we were and our struggles and trials. You know, it's interesting. One of the key things that trials bring is resilience, but another is gratitude.
Yeah.
And we talk so much about gratitude and how key it is, but it's hard to have gratitude actually in the absence of trial, in the absence of pain or difficulty. And there's a correlation between those two, because gratitude is an understanding of where we are versus where we could be. So I think that's the other thing that we're not letting our kids learn when we don't let them go through those struggles or trials, is we're not actually creating an environment where they can learn gratitude.
Wow, that's such a transcendent thought.
Yeah.
And I hope everyone picks up the book. And as we wrap up, there's one emotion that can't be counterfeited, and that's peace.
Hmm.
And where does David York find peace?
Well, that's a good question. And it's been a long, it's constantly a place that I try to be. Years ago, I was in the midst of just my own difficult circumstance and situation, and incredibly stressful time. And I remember just praying, like, God, take this circumstance away, take this situation away.
I know
It
what
kept
that
me up at
feels like.
night, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety. And God would not take it away, would not take it away, would not take it away. And I'll never forget one morning, and after months and months of just silent answers to those prayers, I remember asking God, I said, okay, if you won't take it away, will you go through it with me?
Oh wow.
And he said yes. Yeah, it was one of the clearest indications. One of those times where you just hear from God, and it totally transformed. The situation did not go away. It took a long time to resolve, but he went through it with me, and the peace that I felt with that was just incredible. So that's where I find my I think peace is found with God. There's a great book by Sky Jathani. It's called With, and it talks about our relationship with God and how often we want to have God below us. We want God working for us,
Yeah.
or God's above us. He's the clockmaker who's wound everything up, and he's just above, ethereal, far away. But God with us, and that was what Jesus was Emmanuel, right? God with us. And I think that's when I find the most peace, because I'm not going to find it in my circumstances. I'm not going to find it in my relationships. I'm not going to find it in my bank account. I'm not going to find it on my financial statement. I've tried all those places to find peace.
Tried hard.
Yeah. And, but that's where I find peace is the presence of God irrespective of all those other things.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I felt that when you were in the depths of your trial, when you were in the depths of your pain, and you pled for him to take away the trial, take away the pain. Instead, you just said, okay, God, it's time for me to surrender.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
But please go through it with me.
Yeah. 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 It was, yeah, it was so powerful, and it was so good. And I assume you're in the same situation. I would never want to go back through that again, but I wouldn't give it up.
Right.
Yeah,
it's so true.
And, walking with a limp is in so many ways is such a blessing, because it comes with that humility, it comes with that gratitude, all of those things. But it's not fun at the time.
No.
Yeah.
David, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us, sharing your wisdom with us, giving us a chance to take a look at what we think we own in a different light, so that we can be stewards and realize the gift of everything around us.
Yeah, thank you. I love it, and I love what you're doing, and love what you're working on.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us one more week to learn more about counterfeit emotions and to find that one emotion that can't be counterfeited. Until next week, I wish you peace.